It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Bert Weinberg. We're here in your beautiful home in Beit Vegan in Jerusalem, in Israel. And Bert, you've written the most amazing book, from Hachenburg to Hapisga. And your story is something absolutely incredible, how you managed to leave Germany just in time, and a lot because you found a letter. So if you could tell us a little bit about your family, your incredible family.
Okay. All right. My real name in German was Siegbert Samuel Weinberg. And I was always known as Bert. I was born in 1927 and was able to leave Germany through a miracle. In the 30s, once Hitler came into power, things got progressively worse and worse. They used to boycott my father's little business in this little town of Hachenburg, and they used to have a couple of Nazis stationed there, and they threatened the woman if she would buy something, they would threaten her. So things got worse. There was no Schritte. They would not let us use the swimming pool. All these laws that everybody evidently knows or should know. So as economically, my father's business got, kept going down. So my father went to England in 1935, hoping he would find a family to sponsor us, obviously to come to England. But he was not successful. And he came back to our town, Hachenburg, and in the summer of '37, I went to visit my maternal grandparents in the next little village. It's called Selters, Selters. And
this is a picture of
those grandparents and my mother's parents.
And you remember going to visit them? Do you remember?
Definitely. I was 9 years old, and one afternoon, being bored with nobody to play with, I looked through a drawer where they had family photos, and among these letters, among these pictures, was a letter in English, which of course I couldn't read, and I took it out and showed Opa, was ist das? And he explained to me it's English, and there was after the First World War, 1918, the American Army occupied Germany just as they did after the Second World War, and each of the houses. Why would an army occupy a town of 3,000 people? It doesn't make sense. And since they weren't able to build barracks, each of the larger houses had to take in a few soldiers while they occupied the town. In fact, I have a letter, if I can find it quickly, from a non-Jewish person from northern Minnesota who writes that he, if I would have been prepared, I would have found it. Anyway, he writes, I was stationed in Germany with this Mr. Alex Lurie, who was the man that saved us. And we occupied this little town, and we stayed with these people, my grandparents, for 5.5 months. And they were enemy soldiers. My father was one of 5 brothers who fought in the German army against Russian America. So these soldiers who were stationed in my grandparents' house, they were enemies. But my father, one of the people that was in that group that was in my grandparents' house, Alex Lurie, happened to be Jewish. Now, what's the chance of it that the captain or the sergeant would put this Jew in a Jewish home? A Jewish soldier, I'm gonna put you in a Jewish house. Also, Mamash min hashamayim hashkoka portas. And my grandparents, even though he was an enemy, but he was Jewish, 18, 19-year-old soldiers, and they were nice to him. I don't know what, and I could have had the chance. My grandparents came out after us, and they stayed with us, and I didn't have the sense to ask him to do something like you're doing. What did you do to this soldier that made him feel so comfortable to come back after he was sent back to America after his service? He sat down and wrote a thank you letter to a couple that were nice to him. And I found this letter that afternoon. I said, Opa, was ist das? He said, this soldier was here, put it back, which was also unusual. I didn't obey my grandfather because normally 7, 9-year-old boys, when grandpa said put it back, I would put it back, but I didn't. When I got home, my parents saw the letter. I think I brought it home to show my friends. I have an English letter from an American soldier. And wow, it's exciting. But my father and my mother talked about it. Let's write to this man. This is almost 19 years later. 19 years later, that letter is sitting in the drawer, and I happened to find it. And my father wrote to this man, Alex Lurie, Duluth, Minnesota. Do you remember you stayed at my father-in-law's house?
And I'm just going to show, this is a picture of the house. You have a picture of your grandparents' house.
Yeah.
And these are your grandparents.
And it was a large house to be able to have 5 soldiers or 4 or 5 soldiers plus the family. My grandfather had 4 daughters, and anyway, so my father sat down to write a letter, Alex Lurie, Duluth, and he didn't have an address even, but evidently the mail in those days was better, and Mr. Lurie got the letter, and he wrote back immediately, I will do what I can do to help you get out, because it was not easy to get visas. The immigration laws of America were very strict. In the 30s was the Big Depression, and there were America's unemployment rate at that was 25%, and they didn't need more, more people coming into America, which included Jews. And so he did, and he wrote letters.
I think, Bert, your parents went to Stuttgart to the American consulate,
yes,
to ask for papers, and they were put on the waiting list.
But that came only after Mr. Lurie wrote to the congressman of northern Minnesota, I have these friends who I would like to bring to America. And this Scottish congressman from northern Minnesota wrote to the State Department, Mr. Lurie won some medals in the First World War, and he's the American Legion commander in Duluth. Duluth is a city of 100,000 people. So he was very active in the community, and this congressman, which I have some of his letters. Yeah.
Well, you have a letter here. This was written by your father to in May the 15th, 1938.
Yeah. If you know Pertzman's grandfather, the same congressman helped him get out also through Russia, through Japan, and he landed in Seattle. But here's that letter.
So can we just show the letter?
This is the letter, not the letter. This is the letter from the congressman to also try to get my father's brother out.
So this is from the Congress of the. This is the original.
Yeah.
From the Congress of the United States House of Representatives. Mr. Alex Lurie in Minnesota. And this is for Emil Weinberg.
Yeah, that's Mrs. Pertzman.
And it says, in checking through my files, and particularly the one captioned as above, I do not find any recent correspondence. You will recall that I corresponded with you in 1940. I just want to check up and make sure that no letters are missing from this particular file. Let's hear from you about the case. Sincerely yours, W.A. Pittinger. It's incredible, and this was in April the 14th, 1941.
Yeah. He got out, not by ship like we did and everything nice. He had to go with his wife and one of his two sons.
And this is the original.
Russia, Manchuria.
This is the original letter that your father wrote to Alex Lurie.
Yeah.
In May the 15th, 1938.
Yeah. Just as we were ready to leave. Thanking him for all the effort he made to get visas from us.
And I think when you went to get the visa, your sister had tonsillitis.
Yeah, right. And America did not want anybody who's sick, to come to America. Not the tonsillitis, but somebody had a TB or other sickness. And the doctor that examined us could have been not so friendly. He said, "No, you go back. I can't give you visas." But he was pleasant and nice and everything.
So here you have a picture of with you and your brother Henry and Laurie. This is in 1937.
Yeah. So he was good enough to pass us, and we got visas.
So Bert, this is a document.
It's a letter to the American consul that this man, Mr. Lurie, wants to bring over these people, and he's perfectly capable of helping them because they did not have, like after the Russians came, the Jewish federations gave them help to get an apartment and bought furniture. In 37, 38, there was no such thing. Mr. Lurie had to say that I am willing to, take care of these people.
He's vouching.
Vouching for financial.
And he's going to support.
And I don't think he had any business during the Depression either.
And here's another letter from December the 3rd, 1937, the American consul, Stuttgart, Germany.
Also verifying that Mr. Lurie would be capable of helping these people.
And then you have an original from the Foreign Service of the United States of America, the American Consulate in Stuttgart, Germany, dated February the 16th, 1938. And this is sent to Mr. Alexander J. Lurie in Duluth, Minnesota. The immigration visas of Mr. and Mrs. Eugene Weinberg. This is the original letter from the American Consul General. And here you have from the Treasury Department of the United States, American Consul in Stuttgart, coming from the Treasury Department, that Mr. Lurie advises me that he's interested in the applications for the Weinberg family, and this is dated November the 30th, 1937.
There was no contact from 1918 till 1937 with this Mr. Lurie.
And look what he did. He did all this, all these correspondence, and he was. And just because your grandparents, they were kind to him, and
right. That is the message that I like to tell people, that if you do a chesed or a favor, you don't know what that little chesed eventually might do. Kenhor, my sister, she has 4 children, and my mother, I remember, used to say, how can Laurie manage 4 children? Each of those 4 have multiple numbers. And she has Kenhor now, so sein gesund. She has more than 50 grandchildren married, and they're all having children. And I, Baruch Hashem, and my brother, both of us, he has 3 boys, have big families. I have 3 girls, Kenhor, also big families. And what one man saved, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and all Shomer mitzvahs, all Shomer Shabbos, and wonderful families. Not just mine, my sister has, and my brother also.
But you can see, Bert, these are the letters that your father sent to Alex in appreciation, and this is just before you left. And these are the original letters. It's incredible. And Bert, I'd like to ask you, this is, if I can just ask, you know, your family, if you could tell us a little bit about your father's parents, and your father's side, and then on your mother's side.
Okay. My father was one of 5 brothers and 1 sister. All 5 brothers were in the German army, and after they got out, they got married. One brother did not get married. One brother was wounded in the First World War and died a couple years afterwards from consequences of these wounds that he received. My father's oldest brother, Alfred, or Avram in Hebrew, had 6 children. At that point, he would have had more. He was married to a very religious woman from I think from Fulda, and he sent his 2 oldest sons to Frankfurt to attend the Samson Paul Hirsch high school. So when they were 13 and 14 years old, he sent them to Frankfurt. When things got bad in Frankfurt and every place in Germany, the yeshiva was able to immigrate to to Eretz Yisrael, and these 2 boys were saved. The other 4 and the parents were sent east, which means they didn't make it all the way to Auschwitz. They made it to the ghetto in Lodz, and they perished there.
I think from starvation.
From hunger, and disease, and the second of the sons. Yeah, I show you a family picture of them. I don't know if it's here or there. This is kind of a jumbled interview. It's not planned.
We have a picture here of...
that's the family. They were very religious. She, in fact, was the first cousin to Rav Kunstadt from Kultura. I mean, as you can see by the picture, she's wearing a tichel, which the German Jews didn't cover their hairs. I mean, shadels were not common, but she was very religious.
And Bert, here you have a picture also of David and Yitzchak.
Yeah,
those are the 2.
Those are the 2 sons who were saved.
They went to Samson Raphael Hirsch in Frankfurt, and then they went to Eretz Yisrael.
And then the whole yeshiva.
And here's a picture of them in Eretz Yisrael many years later.
Like now, maybe 30.
And you also have a picture of Sammy.
Sammy was one of those children.
And you remember Sammy?
He was my first cousin. Also the name Shmuel, named after my father's father, who was nifter just before I was born, and I'm named after him. And Sammy was my best friend, and besides being my cousin, we were best friends.
Here is the original picture of the family. And unfortunately, the only the 2 brothers that came to Eretz Yisrael survived, and the rest...
And built each one a beautiful family. One in Bnei Brak and one here in Yerushalayim.
And you have a picture also of Alfred Weinberg in front of the family home.
Yeah, that's a very poor picture. Unfortunately, I don't have all these pictures must have been pictures that my father had, and then my mother got them after he was nifter, and then I eventually got them. And,
it's wonderful, Bert. These pictures are so precious. So you have a picture of your father in the German army.
Yeah.
And you have an amazing statistic that so many Jews served in the First World War. In the German army.
Yeah.
And many
somebody here in Beit Began whose brother was interested, in history. He told me that there were 12,000 Jews in the German army killed.
And this is in the First World War.
Because the Nazis used to say, oh, the Jews were in the army, but they had desk jobs. They didn't fight. And this is amazing. My father got this medal from the Führer, from Hitler in 1935 for bravery. Eugene Weinberg, brave and a Frontkämpfer, a soldier was on the front fighting, and he must have done something bravery, and he got this medal, which.
And here, this is the medal.
Yeah.
And it's dated
why they waited till 1935 to give him this medal.
1914, 1918.
Yeah.
And he got the medal in 1935.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And it comes, Hitler was in power, and
Yeah.
Hitler...
Yeah. He says, yeah, in the name of the Führer and the Reichskanzler, who was the president, I think, of Germany.
And here's a picture of your father.
Yeah.
Did your father ever used to speak to you about his time when he was in the army?
I don't recall, really. I don't recall. He didn't. He didn't.
And here's a picture of the three Weinberg brothers.
Well, right.
Emil, Eugene, and Max.
One is Emil, that's Pert's father, grandfather. But I have it here. This one here. Oh, this. I would like you to see this telegram.
This from...
This aunt, the mother of these 6 boys, her husband was taken to Buchenwald already in 37, 38, 37. They used to round up the Jews, and then they scared them, maybe they would leave.
So this is the...
Yeah, that's the family. And here my aunt writes sends a telegram. Send an affidavit for Alfred. Very urgently. And alles ist gesund, Sophie. That was the last grasp to try to get a visa for her husband, and it didn't succeed.
And she has...
No, this is those 3 brothers that you saw a minute ago.
And she didn't succeed. You couldn't...
No, this Max, you see a Max there?
Yeah.
This Max has an interesting story also. This brother, he left Germany to go to after the Nazis got really bad. He escaped to Belgium, and when the Nazis captured, Belgium, he ran to France, and when the Nazis captured France, he went to southern France, which was controlled by a pro-Nazi, but Pétain was his name, and he didn't round up the Jews to send them to the camps, but he rounded them up to be in a camp where they died of hunger and sicknesses. This is a picture of him, how he looked from the camp. You see that? And imagine a thin, I think he said he weighed about 90 pounds at that point. And I remember my father was making Havdalah one Motzei Shabbos, and the phone rang, and and my mother...
This is already when you were in America?
Yeah. And my mother wanted to answer, and wait till I finish Havdalah. And there's also a telegram from the Uncle Max. Just 2 words. Arrived safely in Cuba. He got out of the camp that he was in the night before the Nazis took over southern France. He went over the Pyrenees Mountains into Portugal, through the snow. A thin, emaciated man must have crawled over the mountains and got to Portugal, and eventually my father was able to bring him to, hopefully to America, but but the boats didn't go anymore. They were full of Nazi submarines. Then he got an old boat, an old tramp steamer, who took him to Cuba, and from Cuba he came to Minneapolis.
But I'm going to show, this is a picture when you were 1 year old.
Yeah.
So
A cute kid.
it's amazing that these pictures, that they survived.
Yeah.
It's actually quite and this is in 1930 with your father in front of the Hachenburg fountains. So Bert, can I ask you, what is your earliest recollections
Of Germany?
of Germany or growing up? What is the earliest thing that you remember as a child?
Well, in Germany, I remember, from the age of 5, 6, I started to think, In fact, I have a picture of my first day in school, someplace, and things were not, things were good. Our family had lived in this town, Hachenburg. My father was born there, I was born there, my grandfather was born there. A lot of these towns that had years of Jews, accepted, not without some anti-Semitism, which is all over the world somehow, again, unfortunately. But we went to public school, and after, when things got really bad in 36, 37, we were still able to go to school, but the teacher didn't call on us, and they separated us. Our schoolroom was boys on one side and girls on other side.
This is your first day at school.
Yeah.
And this is in the Cheder.
Yeah, that's the Cheder.
And there you are with them. But your first day at school, they separated you. But
Yeah.
that must have been, I think it was very embarrassing.
Yeah, it was. In fact, the boys were on one side, the girls were on the other side. The Jewish kids, the desks were double desks. 2 boys in each desk.
You can see
To
it.
embarrass us, they put a boy with a girl in the back of the room. But each morning, we had to say Heil Hitler.
And you remember,
Yeah,
but you never stretched your...
I never stretched. But the teacher paid no attention to us. Didn't call on us to see how we were doing. But and then I remember what once, I don't know if I wrote it in this book. The barber in Hachenburg wouldn't cut Jewish hair anymore. So in my grandparents' house, in the next town, the barber still used to cut. So when I came that summer, I went to the barber to get a haircut, but he pulled down the shade so they wouldn't see.
It was a non-Jewish barber.
Yeah, I'm going. Yeah. I pulled down the shade, and when I come out, there were a bunch of Nazi kids out there trying to beat me. One time they beat me. Our town had a big castle, maybe from hundreds of years ago, and there was a hill, and I was sledding in the snow. There was snow, and I had a sled. And when I got down the hill, a group of Nazi kids were there. They beat me up and left me unconscious in the snow. And my father went next morning to the police. How dare you object to Hitler Youth, go home, Jew. And these, and I think maybe we have to finish there. When we went with Rabbi Bert Weinberg to France, about 20 years ago, on one of his tours that he had, to Italy 1 year, France. I had received this book that these two Goyim wrote about the Jewish community. And I said to them, oh, and they mentioned that there are 82 matzevas that the Nazis did not destroy.
That's gravestones.
Gravestones. And one of them happens to be Samuel Weinberg, who I'm named after, Shmuel. So I said to my wife, who really didn't want to step on German soil, and I'd like to go there just for 24 hours to go to the caver of my grandfather, who I'm named after, and they have the I think it's a new matzeva, because it looks modern.
So this is the book Zachor, and it was written by two non-Jews.
Non-Jews. One of the people, an older man, knew Jews. The younger man, who's still there now, because my daughter from Baltimore and her husband, on their way to Israel in a few weeks, want to stop in Hachenburg and also see the caver. I will show you in the book of Zachor I have.
And here is the monument to Hachenburg in memory of the Jews of Hachenburg, first citizens, then driven out, chased out, murdered. And this is it's by Werner Guth and Johannes Kemp. It's amazing that they wrote this book.
Yeah, you see this book, the detail that they have in here is just...
Because there weren't that many Jews living in Hachenburg.
Maybe 15 families. The height in this book, it says the number of Jews there, and each family they had 126 Jews at the largest. But I just want to show you what happened to it. It must have.
So there were 15 Jewish families. They said 99 individuals in 1932 out of a population of 3,000 Gentiles. And Bert, did you have any non-Jewish friends growing up?
I don't recall that.
Or in class, did you have any?
I don't. Maybe I did, but I don't recall.
And your family, was it always a very frum family? You grew up.
Yeah. Most this lecture that I heard of the 1,000 villages, he says most of them were frum people. They kept Shabbos and Yom Tov, not learned like Jews from Lithuania.
But they kept Shabbos and Yom Tov.
They kept Shabbos and Yom Tov. The larger cities in Germany, Berlin and Frankfurt and Hamburg, were very assimilated already, from there.
And do you remember going to the shul, to the synagogue?
I remember going to the shul, and interesting enough, these two guys that wrote this book,
Guth and Kemp.
Yeah, the shul did not get burned in Kristallnacht, when they burned most of the shuls in Germany. Why didn't they destroy my shul?
I think it was right close to the houses.
Here's a picture. Here's the shul in the middle and the two houses attached.
So if they would have destroyed the shul, then they would have burnt down the houses, the adjacent houses.
They destroyed inside, I'm sure. I don't know it myself.
And I think during the war, the Germans used it, and I think they had a swastika at the top.
Yeah, on top, yeah. And
I think you mentioned in your book, Bert, that there was a door that you always wondered what the door was.
Yeah. And this non-Jew, the old man still remembered das war die Frauen, the women came to go to the mikveh.
Now I just want to mention something. When you had to leave, do you remember when you got the visas and you were departing? Do you remember leaving your town and
Yes.
leaving the house?
That I don't really remember. I remember getting to Hamburg where the boat docked.
But leaving your hometown, do you have any memories, or were you upset to leave? Did you have?
No, I can't think of. I'm sure I was happy to be able to leave, but I don't remember specifically.
I think you went with your father to see his mother.
Yeah, that I remember distinctly.
So can you just tell us, because that's
Yeah.
very emotional what happened.
My father went to say a goodbye to his 80-year-old mother. The chances of her getting out were very small. So he and I went up. My grandmother and her daughter lived upstairs of my uncle Alfred. And we went up the steps, and I must say goodbye, Oma, and I probably kissed her. And my father sent me to come down the stairs first, and I got halfway down, and my father, I could hear him crying bitterly. He's leaving a mother, never to see her again, most likely, and she ended up in Theresienstadt. I have correspondent letters from her. I actually have the actual letters too, and in this book it says her name Sabine Weinberg and her daughter Johanna were sent to Auschwitz, and Hannah was immediately gassed. If these guys
Because the letters from
how do they know this thing?
these are the letters from Theresienstadt.
Yeah. You
With the
see
censor, with the
Weinberg,
German censor.
Sabine Weinberg.
And your father's paternal grandparents, Shmuel and Sabrina Weinberg.
Yeah.
So your grandmother came from a very, very choshev.
Yeah.
She's a descendant of the Maharal of Prague.
Yeah. That's what Peretzman's grandfathers told us. Emil Weinberg. Here, each family got a write-up, where and
This is the Weinberg. And they did this in German.
yeah, I mean they're going. They wrote it in German.
And how was it, Bert, when you went back to the town? Was it very traumatic going back?
Yeah, I found it very.
Did you manage to go to your home?
No, I went to the home, but the people were not home. In fact, I was going to send this to my daughter, who's going there.
And this is when Bert went back. This is on the return trip to Hachenburg with Werner Gut and Johannes Kempf, and this is with dignitaries of the town.
Here's a map that I found among my mother's things. This is the main street. Here's the fountain here someplace. Oh, you can't see the fountain. Yeah, here's the fountain, which must have been the centerpiece. There's an old map.
And that's where you have the picture when you were in 1930, when you...
Yeah, right. Here, did you see this?
And this is when you...
Oh, the two Goyim that wrote the book.
This is with the fountain today. And did you see the shul when you went back?
Yes, it's still standing, but it's
Today it's not. They know.
nothing to signify that it was a shul.
And here's when in 1930 you in front of the fountains.
This is it's a beautiful town now. But I think that I'm going to quit talking.
Bert, I just want to ask you the last thing. When you left your town, so it appeared in the German newspaper, and you have a cutting of it.
Yes, I do.
And it's very sad. Here it's in German, and it's.
I have.
They say that the Jew.
A newspaper article, someplace.
But here you have it in your book.
Yeah.
And
the
Jew Eugene Weinberg leaves Hachenburg. It must be difficult to leave the good hunting grounds in Germany where he could tow away profits year after year and promote the racial contamination while the German national comrades are getting worse and worse. Finally, the twilight of the Jew begins. They are slowly, almost too slow, disappearing from Hachenburg, from our homeland. It is important not to let any emotional feelings arise as the encounters again. Hereditary defects for the Germans mean to say that the fact that Germans have sympathy for the Jews is just a genetic problem of the Germans. So we experience is that the Judah Weinberg is now also tying up his bundle, and Hachenburg is finally getting Judenrein, free of the Jews, even without a pogrom. This is so sad.
That is amazing.
And this was done in 1938.
Yeah. When I had mentioned that before already. We went with Rabbi Wein on a trip to France. But when I got this book, Zachor, I said to my wife, let's stop in Hachenburg, because it says that the cemetery there, the Jewish cemetery, was built in 1700 something, and there are these two matzevas, and I have a letter from a map from them. I have it. I can't find it just now. The cemetery has these matzevas there, and I was able to see my grandfather's matzeva and say a Hakel Moleh to a grandfather whom I never met because he died the year before I was born, and I saw the shul, and I saw the house that I was born in, and the next morning this younger man took us back to Frankfurt to catch the plane to go to Paris, and that was less than 24 hours we were there.
You have a postcard of the ship, the Washington, that you...
Which was the largest ship.
And even a list of the passengers.
Yeah.
And you had kosher food, and you had a shul even on the ship.
Yeah, we had a shul, we had kosher meals.
And you have a list.
You see the Weinbergs inside there. The name.
And Alex, can I just ask, it's unbelievable. When you got to America, what was the first time you met Alex Lurie?
Yeah.
How was that interaction? Because this is the man that saved your family, and because of that letter, you had a special connection. But how was the interaction when you met him?
I don't recall. We wanted to stay in New York because my mother had an older sister who had come the year before.
Here's the Weinberg from the list on the ship.
But there were no jobs in New York during the big depression, and so my aunt and uncle says, go to Duluth, Minnesota. Maybe this man will help you, with a job. And after 2 weeks with my aunt and uncle, we took a train, to Duluth, and we stayed with the Lurries for 2 weeks till we got an apartment. And they're good people. They're not religious, and there's unfortunately nothing left of the family as far as I was able to ascertain on Google. But they were Uncle Alex and Aunt Edith, and we used to go to Duluth after we moved to Minneapolis. I used to travel up to Duluth on business, and I always went to see Aunt Edith and spend some time with her. And the chesed that my grandfather did to this soldier, and this man took it upon himself, and it took 5-6 months to get
all these
visas and things.
But the Karasa Tov, he had such gratitude and such...
Yeah. He must have been lonely soldiers, far from home, 18, 19-year-old boy.
And so you always kept the connection when you were in America?
Oh yeah, Uncle Alex and Louis.
So, I want to ask you, what message do you give to your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? What message do you give when they ask you for advice or what you've gone through?
Yeah, I try to be a good father. Baruch Hashem, we have wonderful daughters, amazing daughters, good to us. One daughter lives just 2 blocks from us, and she's very helpful to us as old people with doctor appointments, and without her, actually, when we moved here 30 years ago, we didn't want to stay in Minneapolis, even though I had a very good business with my brother, but none of the 3 sons-in-law were going to move to Minneapolis. So either we were going to move to Baltimore, where the second daughter lives. He's part of the Ner Yisrael Yeshiva staff, or come to Eretz Yisrael, where the other 2 daughters lived. And so my wife was even more Zionistic than I am. She said we have a chance to live in Eretz Yisrael after thousands of years of Golos. And so Baruch Hashem, we moved here, and we have Kei Nahara Nachas from my children, my grandchildren, now Kei Nahara greater.
And your sister's here? Your sister is here as well?
My sister, my brother passed away, unfortunately, with a serious illness. But he has 3 sons who are one of the mainstay families in the community of Minneapolis. They are very active in the day school, in the shul, in everything.
I just want to thank you.
Okay.
I think I need to thank you. I'm just going to show your book that you, having also lived in Beit Vegan for nearly 30 years, we came here in '94, and I go every Shabbos to our shul on Hapisga. So to see from Hachenburg to Hapisga, and to have read your book and your story, and to meet. By you, actually amazing, by you looking in that drawer and taking out that letter and bringing it home, it saved not only your life, it saved your parents' life, and so many neshamas are in this world because of...
There are hundreds and hundreds.
It's amazing. We
don't count, but...
So if I can just mention, Bert, because I'm overwhelmed, and there are no words really, that the act of kindness that your grandparents that they did for this American soldier, and him writing back to thank them, and then your father writing by chance if he would do something to help, and him responding, it's just miracles upon miracles. That after all those years, to receive a letter without an address, just to mention Duluth, America, and his name, and for him to respond, it is something it's miracles upon miracles.
It is.
I think your life is a miracle. And it's Karas HaTov. I think if ever there was any story that exemplifies gratitude and thanks to Hashem, and this is your story.
That's my story. This spoon is a sculpture in one of the parks in Minneapolis. I don't know why he picked that for the front.
It's a beautiful book, and it's just amazing, and I think it's magnificent. It's also
one of my grandsons here, who's learning in a very Hachenburg kollel here. He used to call me Motzei Shabbos for at least 10 weeks. Dad, Opa, tell me your story and tell me about all these things that he.
This is Zevi Tendler.
Huh?
Zevi Tendler.
Yeah, Zevi Tendler. He was just here Friday with his 4 little kids, just for a short visit to say good Shabbos. And he and his wife put this thing together and got a printer.
It's amazing.
And one of my other granddaughters from my daughter here in Beit Vegan, she is translating it into Hebrew.
It's wonderful.
And she's almost finished, I heard. Well, without asking me, she sat down, and she's a busy mother with family, but she must have enjoyed the book enough that she wants our non-English speaking great-grandchildren to be able to
Well, you are an example for all of us to emulate, and I want to thank you so much, and you should just have Mazel Bracha.
Can I see this thing?
For sure, and thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you.
I'm grateful that you do this wonderful work. Kol HaKavod.
Bert, I think your parents were the most remarkable people.
They were.
They were very special, and they raised such an unbelievable family.
Oh, yeah.